Hey, Oz, what movie we watching this week?
Ooh, I've got one for you. This week we've got a marriage of Driving Miss Daisy in reverse, Miss Congeniality, and Roadhouse. We're watching The Bodyguard, starring Kevin Costner and Whitney Houston. All right, welcome back, listeners. Let's talk about Flicks, the weekly podcast where we take a theme for the month and we go back and forth bringing movies to crack each other up and have a good time discussing. We are in episode 15 where we're covering The Bodyguard, and I'm one of your hosts, Oz.
And I'm Curtis.
And we are going to enjoy this movie. Full disclaimer, as you know, I told you before we got started, Jenny and I, my wife Jenny picked this one out. She was tickled when we gave her the opportunity to pick a couple movies. She wanted to add a couple of movies to my scene category. And this is a movie that's been out since 1992. Mm-hmm. I was well aware of it, but I had not seen it prior to when we watched it a couple of weeks ago. So unlike most weeks where it's fresh in my mind because I've watched it within a day or two, it has been a couple of weeks since this one. But I took good notes immediately after, and I honestly... I can't get Whitney Houston's "I've Got Nothing" out of my head since this movie was over. I've listened to it probably 10 times without really telling anybody because I'm like, I just can't get that song out of my head.
Well, it is the biggest selling soundtrack of all time.
Yeah, I think prior to it was probably Saturday Night Fever soundtrack.
Yes,
which I used to own. I was a big fan of Saturday Night Fever back in high school. Owned the 2-disc set. But yeah, it doesn't surprise me that this overtook it. You know, I think even without the extra add-ons, just the power of this Whitney Houston album would have sold a ton of copies anyway. But basically, it's got an hour and a half music video to go along with it. So I think it really put that more in the spotlight. So we're gonna dig into The Bodyguard here. What do we got for characters?
So as far as characters, so it's Oz's week to do the plot, so I got the character breakdown.
Yeah.
The two leads, we have Frank Farmer, as you pointed out, Oz, in a text chat between us. He's got a real superhero name, Frank Farmer.
He's your Peter Parker or your Matt Murdock.
Your Reed Richards, your Scott Summers.
Yeah, or your Tony Stark.
Your Donnie Darko.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Frank Farmer, who is a bodyguard for hire, kind of a mercenary, played by Kevin Costner at the height of Kevin Costner's peak here.
Yes. Height of Kevin Costner's peak, which we also talked about in the text exchange. Mm-hmm. Costner's movies really have never done much for me. I've just never gotten on the Kevin Costner bandwagon. So I guess Kevin Costner being at the peak of Hollywood, I guess gives the glimpse of like, it's probably not one of the most it's not on the list of tallest mountain ranges to be the peak of.
But he really was kind of like the Hollywood star in the early to mid 90s.
And with that being said, I sit here and I'm like, okay, what can I name from Kevin Costner movies? Dances with Wolves. Mm-hmm. You got Bull Durham.
Yeah.
You got The Postman. You got Waterworld. Then you got different sports movies. You got Tin Cup in there. Mm-hmm. But what else did Kevin Costner do?
Field of Dreams.
Oh yeah, Field of Dreams. I haven't seen that one either.
He was in some late 80s action movie. I want to say with Gene Hackman.
Okay, you could say that.
Yeah, I don't want to. I don't want to.
You don't want to say.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of it, but it was one of those like late 80s. Like, it felt like every action star in the 80s and 90s had a late 80s movie that kind of flew under the radar.
Right.
And I, of course, can't remember the name of it, but I know Gene Hackman.
I'm looking for it as you go with characters.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, Kevin Costner was the guy of the early to mid 90s. So moving on with characters as Oz does the research there.
How could we forget Robin Hood? Prince of Thieves?
Yeah, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Very problematic movie, but another big soundtrack movie.
Yeah, I mean, really, 1990 had Dances with Wolves. 91 was Robin Hood. 92 was The Bodyguard. So yeah, I could see where he was at the peak. Of
was
things,
it No Way Out?
sure.
Was that the name of it?
Yeah, it was.
No
it was
Way
No
Out.
Way Out.
Gene Hackman.
Yeah.
So the opposite star here, opposite of Kevin Costner, is Whitney Houston as Rachel Marin, basically playing a version of Whitney Houston.
Whitney Houston.
Yes,
for sure. Yeah. Her performance in this movie is what I think gave Marshall Mathers the chops to star as himself in 8 Mile.
Yeah. The first,
probably
the first movie that Whitney Houston was in, the first of a couple. I think she was in Waiting to Exhale.
Yeah, she was.
Yeah. We also have Bill Cobbs, steady as he goes, actor Bill Cobbs, as Bill Devaney, something like that. He played Rachel's manager, and a very genuine person. I think the only person in Rachel's circle who was really on the up and up.
Right.
We have Nikki, who is Rachel's sister and personal secretary, played by an actress named Michelle Lamar Richards. We have Tony, who is the existing bodyguard on staff, played by the one and only Mike Starr.
Yeah, I like Mike Starr.
Yeah, Mike Starr's great. We have a character named Cy Spectre, non-superhero, who yeah.
That's a super villain name.
Yeah, it is definitely a super villain name. Rachel's publicist, played by Gary Kemp. We have Fletcher, Rachel's 8-year-old son, played by an actor named Devon Nixon, who I was looking at him a little bit. He played the son in Terminator 2.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I could see that. Not Eddie Furlong's character.
No,
not Linda Hamilton.
No, not Linda Hamilton's. Yeah.
Not John Connor. He wasn't John Connor.
Yes.
He was. Yeah, he was when they busted into the dude that runs Cyberdyne.
Yes.
Yeah, that son.
Yeah, he was there. Henry, the quote-unquote the cocky black chauffeur, as
I liked Henry.
Kevin Costner's character referred to him as, played by Christopher Burt. Got a couple others. Greg Portman, who is another bodyguard, used to work with Kevin Costner's character Frank in the past, played by Tomas Arana. Herb Farmer, because great dad name, Herb Farmer.
Herb.
Frank's dad, played by Ralph Waite. And Ray Count, who is a buddy from, I don't know, the police, some kind of institution. I never quite figured out who his character was. Played by Gary Bandman, who was the uncle from Home Alone. The look what you did, what you did, you little jerk.
Fuller's dad.
Yeah, Fuller's dad. He wets the bed.
That's how we know him around our house is Fuller's
dad. The uncle. The guy,
the one that was just like on the curtails of Kevin's dad paying for everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Your dad paid good money for my vacation.
He stole the silverware and the plane and refused to pay the pizza guy. All I got's traveler's checks.
Don't you screw this up for me. Your dad paid good money for this vacation.
And I will point out, before we move on to the plot, this movie was written by Lawrence Kasdan.
Yeah, I did see that. I've forgotten that, but yeah.
In a script that he wrote in the 70s, originally intended for Diana Ross and Steve McQueen.
Which I think works better now than it would have then. I mean, it would have worked because we wouldn't have had a comparison, obviously. So I feel Steve McQueen is a much better actor than Kevin Costner, and my ratings board of which would I rather watch. I'd rather watch a Steve McQueen movie. I love Diana Ross music. I'm not a fan of her on camera. Yeah. I think Whitney being Whitney fits this role better than Diana Ross being Diana Ross. Personally.
Yeah. I will say Kevin Costner's hair, he directly inspired from Steve McQueen. He had his hair cut to look like Steve McQueen, which is why he kind of, I don't know, something about him just doesn't look right in this movie.
No.
And it's because he's literally doing a Steve McQueen impression.
Right. Now, I will admit that Jenny and I watched Yellowstone, which I coincidentally, accidentally even, always refer to as Yosemite. I know it's not called Yosemite, but I always end up calling it Yosemite, and she looks at me, I'm like, I mean Yellowstone. And Costner he's perfect in that role. I really do enjoy that show. He's great in that show. You know, and it fits him. It fits him wonderfully. You figure, guys spent a career around horses, you know, between Dances with Wolves and Robin Hood and the Postman or whatever. So I guess, you know, being a cattle rancher,
Water World,
Water World, and seahorses in that regard. But it's a great show. So I do like that show. So I was on board with giving Costner a go for this. I'm like, hadn't really been down that Kevin Costner filmography path. I really do enjoy him in Yellowstone. So I'm like, okay, we'll see how this works.
All right.
And we'll get to our review and afterthoughts as we go along. Yeah. Let's jump into some plot.
Let's get into the plot here, Oz.
Right. So we're in a movie called The Bodyguard. And if you're not sure which character is the bodyguard, that's given away in the opening moments of this film, which takes place in a parking garage where you've got some sniveling little person, you know, on the ground, and Kevin Costner guarding his body. He's
thus the bodyguard.
So they could have just eschewed the title itself and just shown him as they pan, like, oh, the bodyguard.
Okay. I get it.
Yeah, and so, you know, Frank, he's in a parking garage, and he's killed a man. You know, not in your Freddie Mercury Queen sense where he put a gun against his head, but he did shoot him down. And the camera just keeps panning further back. We want to make sure that we see the overhead sprinkler system. You know, it's like, I didn't think they were ever going to stop panning back in this opening shot. And so, you know, and then we jump from that, juxtapose quickly into a dressing room. There's a television showing a performance, and some, you know, off-screen hand sets a doll down, and, you know, and then boom, that doll explodes, the dressing room explodes. We find out that that's Rachel's dressing room. We haven't met either character yet. We've seen Frank, but we haven't heard his name. We've seen Rachel's dressing room. She is absent from the dressing room, by the way. But there has been an attempt on her life, which is nice because it propels us into the story.
Yes.
That we have a celebrity, musician, actress that has had threats on her life. She needs
a bodyguard.
She needs a bodyguard. And you know what? Frank is the best in the business.
He's the bodyguard.
Yeah, he is. He's the Dalton of the Roadhouse world. So Bill, contacts Frank.
Name's Frank.
I thought you'd be bigger. So Bill reaches out to Frank, goes to his house, which is really, for somebody who gets paid as well as he seems
very modest,
to get paid,
very modest home.
Very, very modest home. You know, they're in the backyard talking it over. Bill's pushing for Frank. We need you, man. You know, she needs it, and Frank's just not on board. He almost seems rattled by what happened. You know, we find out why he's rattled later, but you know, that opening scene where he actually had to draw his gun and fire and kill a man to protect, you know, who he's supposed to. It seems to have taken a mental effect on him. So Frank seems very aloof and he's not really on board. He recommends some people, but nope, Bill's like, it's got to be you.
He recommends a guy named Portman.
Yes, he does recommend Portman, who comes into play later on. And so Frank finally agrees. All right, $3,000 a week, and I'm in. And that's chump change for somebody like Rachel. She's on top of the world here. So this movie just clips right along too.
Yeah, the pacing, you know, it's got a pretty good pace at the beginning.
Yeah.
Scene to scene. So,
yeah, it definitely digs its heels in a little bit later, but we'll get there. Frank shows up to Rachel's, and he's kind of looking around, and you know, Rachel lives in a palace. Oh, really, you know, she's in a mansion, but man, you know, for as modest a home as Frank lives in, he's aware of what kind of shape his home is in. Rachel's not aware. You know, the buzzer to the front gate has been like hardwired.
It's hanging on by like paper clips and rubber bands.
Yeah, like the cameras are, you know, out of angle. I mean, it's just bad. So Frank shows up, and you know, as everybody he talks to, he gives some different historical name.
Yeah, and it's all like Thomas Edison here for Rachel.
And everyone's like, okay, Mr. Edison.
Okay. Henry Ford here for Rachel. Okay, Mr. Ford.
Right. And it was so goofy.
It was very out of place.
Yes, he does. And like, he's not trying to be funny. It could have been comedic.
Yeah.
But it wasn't delivered well. Like you said, it's out of place. He's dropping these historical names just to see how easy it would be to slip past security.
And to let the audience know that he's obviously using different names. Because he can't just make up different names. He has to use historical figures.
Right. Yeah, I have to use real people because
otherwise, how would you know I'm making it up?
Right. If the audience couldn't ground it in reality. It would have been great, though, if he'd have been like, Bobby Brown here to see Rachel Marin.
that would have
Whitney.
Yeah, that would have led a lot of different angle on that.
Whitney Houston here to see Rachel Marin.
Kevin Costner here to see Rachel Marin.
Exactly. Bill Cobbs here to see Rachel Marin.
Robin Loxley.
So he shows up. He's given these names, and he quickly realizes that she's not the right client for him. She's had a threat on her life that we find out she's not even really aware of.
No, they've kept her in the dark.
Her security detail, Bill included, has really worked hard to not let her know how risky her life is at the moment. And so she's not understanding why she needs a bodyguard. So she's very, very spoiled, very privileged.
Mm-hmm.
She's filming a music video in her house at the time. Bill's trying to get her to stop so they talk. But again, like at this point, we don't know that she doesn't know. And so it was very just put off and very, she's willing to just ignore anything they're wanting to do because she doesn't realize what kind of risk she's in, what kind of danger she's in. And so, Frank then finds out about the threatening letters we see that have been sent to Rachel, and that, again, she doesn't know about them. At one point, there was a break-in, and someone had put a letter on her bed and then tried to impregnate the bed.
Unsuccessfully.
Yeah. Right. He left a deposit on the bed for her.
We also get introduced.
She wasn't aware of it.
We get introduced to Cy here as well.
Yes.
The publicist, and you kind of put two and two together that Cy is the one who's been keeping her in the dark, because he doesn't want it to affect her performance. He doesn't want it to affect her visibility and her accessibility to the public. It's his job to keep her at the front lines there, to keep her visible to her audience, to the public.
And he's very slimy.
Yeah, he is. Oh, super slimy.
This is, 92 was close enough to the 80s for him to be that 80s slime ball, and he's definitely that 80s slime ball.
Yeah, he would have fit in well on Wall Street.
Yeah, very much so. Or, trying to cut a deal with in Nakatomi Plaza.
Yeah. Doing coke off the back of a toilet.
Yeah, he would have been that guy. And so Frank agrees, okay, I'm in. He realizes now that of the unknown threats the unknown to Rachel threats that that this is serious. And so he's on board, but if I'm doing it, it's got to be done my way.
Yeah.
And so this is again his Dalton and Roadhouse. If I'm doing it, it's my way. And so he puts forth this extensive overhaul of her security system, of the entire home. I mean, we're talking, fences are changed, cameras are changed, locks are changed. The way that security handles her has changed. And again, so many of them are in the dark, and of course, they've all been very comfortable. They've all been taken care of. And so they're, the only one that's really on board aside from Bill is the limo driver.
Yeah. We get, Henry, we get introduced to Henry, who I will note that Frank teaches Henry how to Tokyo drift in the limo.
I did. In a limo. And so, everybody, he's kind of uprooted their comfort level. And Rachel still isn't really aware why. And so, but we get there. And so she really gets after Frank. You know, accuses him of being paranoid, because her life's been fine. Why all this extra?
What's the big deal? Yeah,
right. I don't get it. And of course, he's just so, and he is paranoid. But that's his job as a bodyguard. And he's at this point, he's more than a bodyguard. Like, he's head of security, which doesn't have it. Just that title doesn't come off. You know, call this movie Head of Security. It just doesn't stick the way the Bodyguard.
The Bodyguard. It would give right. that line late in the movie a whole different meaning.
Yeah, I'm the head of security.
He's the head of security.
I like how they emphasize the word "the" in this, as if they go to the Miami University,
the Ohio State. Yeah, it's all about the article that comes in front of the noun.
Yeah, very much so. Mm-hmm. And so Rachel's got a performance at a club. She decides she's going to go. She's going to perform. Sighs all over it. Frank, bad idea. Don't think you should do it. Because again, Frank's aware. Does Rachel know at this point of the threats? Does she?
I think it's around the time where they go to the club where they kind of clue her in. I think it's as they're on their way, and she freaks out.
Yeah, they do because of and so she freaks out. You know, she's angry that they haven't told her. But she realizes I can't let this beat me. I can't let this slow me down. And so she's got this performance. Shows up at this club. You know, she's kind of in a cloak. Whisks it off, and she
kind of looks like a character from Assassin's Creed.
Nah, she reminded me more of the Warlord from WWE. She's just shiny metal everywhere.
Well, I was the cloak.
The cloak. The cloak
was Assassin's Creed.
She goes, she takes that cloak off, and she's the Barbarians tag team partner. But yeah, she's given this performance on stage. It's a very small club for somebody as prestigious as she is.
Cy arranged it that way because he wanted it to it was going to be part of her basically B-roll for music videos and things like that.
Oh, that's right. And so she goes to this club to perform. She's kind of snapping her fingers at Frank. You're not going to slow me down. You can't stop this. This is who I am. She's giving her performance every time. That there's kind of a rush on her. Frank wants to come out and beat everybody up, and she just keeps giving him a finger no, this is how it works. Well, eventually it's too much, overtakes the stage. She finally gets all in a panic. Frank comes and rescues her. Where'd I lose my notes? Oh, there we go. Riot ensues. He's got to save her.
Picks her up, carries her off. Tony's like, follow me, I know the way. And Frank goes a different way because Frank has his own plan. Right,
because Frank's in charge. He's the head of security.
The head of security.
This really does gain her trust for him. It really opens the door to a relationship. Meanwhile, in the background of all this, we get these short little scenes of the creep.
Yeah.
We've got, we see the letter and it's your very stereotypical cut the words out of a magazine, piece them together on a sheet of paper. And so it amazes me how many big, bold letters show up in magazines, so he could cut them all out, die in big, bold letters. And, it's like, so he's either reading the high contrast versions of all these magazines or else he subscribes to a lot of magazines.
It's probably like highlights for kids. Because in kids magazines, the script is typically bigger, so it's probably highlights and Sports Illustrated for kids.
Absolutely, and probably cut a lot of this stuff straight from Goofus and Gallant, the little comic strip of the good boy, the bad boy out of highlights.
Maybe zoo books. A lot of zoo books.
Ranger Rick. But yeah, we see a lot of these little, not a lot, but I mean, we get a couple of these spliced in scenes where we see some creep that's putting this stuff together. He's watching Rachel, but we don't see his face yet. We see a silhouette. We see his hands.
Yeah, we see hands wearing rubber gloves and an incredibly shiny pair of scissors. Like
Yes,
the shiniest pair of scissors ever.
Chrome, pure chrome scissors.
It's the only way to make ransom notes.
Right. Those scissors will get him into Valhalla. That's how shiny and chrome they are.
Nice.
They're not Fiskars. They're Morton Joe brand scissors.
Yeah, Morton Joe.
And so, we see that kind of coming in. We actually see the guy at the performance.
He's there. Yeah, you finally see him full there.
And Frank just kind of, because we know who he is, they don't know who he is. He hasn't made any play on anything yet, but he definitely at this point in the movie is the threat.
Mm-hmm. Or so you think.
Right. And so we got a really cool scene of Tony being mad at Frank.
Yeah. How come you didn't follow me at the club? Why are you going off script? I've been protecting her for years. Who are you?
Yeah, I could do this, and Frank's in the kitchen eating his tangerines and
using a throwing knife to cut the tangerine.
Right, which should have been a heads up to Tony that you probably don't want to mess with him.
Yep.
And so just kind of a cool little fight scene where Tony just completely telegraphs every motion every move he's going to make. And Frank just dodges. I mean, it's comical, but it fits. He's laying down. He's marking his territory. He's peeing on this fire hydrant. That I'm in charge now.
I find it funny the last line in this scene, because Frank doesn't say a word through the whole fight.
No.
Does not say a word. And then as it finishes up, he throws the knife across the room, and it whizzes by Tony's head and sticks in a cabinet.
Yeah.
And that's when Tony's like, "Okay, I'm done." And then Frank, the only line he says aloud, says, "I don't want to talk about this again." Zing! Because you got him, Frank.
Yeah, way to go, Frank. A big emotional conversation they just had about it. But yeah, Tony loses. Yeah. So, Frank's doing Frank stuff. He's on grounds duty. He's checking the fences. He's watching the gates. Yeah. He's checking the perimeter. He's the border collie of the security measure.
I'll jump in here really quick, guys. We in the meantime, we have been introduced to a couple other characters. Fletcher, Rachel's 8-year-old son.
Oh, yeah.
Who Frank kind of forms this, I don't know, kind of like uncle-ish kind of relationship with.
Yeah.
Not like fun uncle, but like protective uncle.
There's nothing fun about Frank.
No.
He's all business.
Oh yeah, he's all business all the time.
Yeah.
And we also get introduced to Nikki, the publicist, or his secretary, Rachel's personal secretary, who kind of you learn that she had a kind of a burgeoning career of her own.
She did, yeah.
But then Rachel came along.
Yep. And they're sisters, as we've mentioned before. So not only is there this just kind of sisterly combative relationship, but she works for her too. So it's this it's kind of tough to your family, but you're also my paycheck. So she harbors a lot of feelings that we'll get into later on. But so like I was getting at, Frank's he's checking the details. He's making sure the security's up to measure. And Rachel, she's going on a jog, and she comes up, she gets kind of playful, and it's kind of nice. She's asking Frank, like, "Are you going to be with me all the time?" And he's like, "Well, I'm the bodyguard.
I'm the bodyguard."
All right. And so she's like, "So, even when I'm on a date, if I'm on a date, you're going to be there?" And he's like, "Well, yeah." And she's like, "I can't date anybody then. I guess I'm just going to have to date you. If you're always going to be around." And so she kind of asks him on a date, and he just really catches him off guard. Especially that just kind of the cantankerous relationship they've had up to this point.
Yeah, and she's super flirty, with him.
Yeah, and so he really doesn't know how to respond because he's Frank Farmer.
Yeah, he's the bodyguard.
Right. I'm not the body toucher. I'm the bodyguard.
Not the body dater.
Exactly. And so he's just kind of it's this cute.
It's a cute little back and forth, and you see a little bit of vulnerability from him, a little bit of something.
Yeah, right. There's a crack in his foundation.
Yeah, and so they go on a date, And he takes her to see the most romantic movie that he knows, Akira Kurosawa's Yojimbo.
Exactly. What was the first movie you and Melissa saw together?
Oh man, I gotta turn the clock back on that. I think that one of the first movies we watched together, not necessarily in a theater.
Fair enough.
Was Evil Dead 2.
Yeah, well, my first date with Jenny was Cloverfield. Mm-hmm. So I would venture to say, despite our love for said movies, that Kurosawa's Yojimbo was probably the better of the movie of the three. But yeah, it was. Oh, I got the. Yeah, he drops his professionalism here, and let's go on a date.
Let's go see an early '60s Japanese subtitled movie about a lone samurai.
You are in Frank Farmer's world, so you just hold on, lady. We're gonna go see Yojimbo, and then I'm gonna take you to a country western bar.
They got both kinds of music there.
That's right, country and western, and no one's going to fit that dynamic. I mean, but you know what? If he's going to take her somewhere where she's not going to stick out like a sore thumb, it would be Yojimbo in a country western bar. You know, there is the plot line for Yojimbo is inspired, or is the inspiration for The Bodyguard. Very similar plot lines, and so there's a reason why that was the film of choice. But yeah, it's a kind of a, I don't know, you shoehorned it in there. Like, this is your date movie? Like okay.
A lot of parallels, too, because the Frank really kind of sees himself as this, like, lone samurai.
Yes, I am. I'm the Toshiro Mifune of the Bodyguard world.
I don't get close to people.
And we did leave out he's former Secret Service, Frank Farmer.
Yep.
And so... you know, he's former Secret Service, which leads a little bit into his vulnerability in his, it's a chink in his armor a little bit. We'll get to that. They end up back at his place, which, as we saw earlier, was not well kept. So I'm assuming he stopped by and cleaned up first. But they end up back at his place, and they sleep together.
They do. And you know they slept together because he showed her his samurai sword, and next to the bed is the unsheathed samurai sword. How you like that? Yeah. You didn't think there was anything subtle about this movie.
No.
I'm going to unsheath my sword and take you to bed.
It's shiny and chrome.
A lot of parallels between this and Mad Max. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Mad Max, Frank Farmer, there's alliteration.
Yeah, and that's about it. That's about it.
And so, you know, they wake up the next morning and he's back in Frank Farmer mode.
Oh yeah, he's back in business. He's putting his business suspenders on and everything.
He's angry at himself for allowing himself to be so vulnerable, and it creates another rift between the two of them. Really, like she goes hard.
Oh yes, she does.
Nothing up to this point has warranted an R rating in this film.
And then, one of the signature lines in this movie.
Whitney just drops the hammer.
Oh yeah,
here.
She does.
But it's revealing not only in that she is a lot like Frank Farmer. She is so absorbed in her spot in her career that she doesn't have time to be a person.
Yeah.
She's a caricature of her profession. And she has no personal connections. Everybody that she's related to works for her. And so there's she's just surrounded by yes men. And so here's Frank, who, because he's trapped in his own samurai world, you know, she sees him as, here's an outlet for me. I can be myself with him and not have to worry about a performance, not have to worry about the show. I can just be with Frank. Yeah. And they were for that night. They had a great time. They danced. You know,
she touched his sword.
Yeah, exactly. You know, she turned that dagger into a katana, and they, you know, they had a nice time. But the next morning, and Frank he's furious at himself and takes it out on her.
And he tells her, "You can live with it or fire me."
Right.
And she responds with, "But I can't." Another F word, you.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like it caught me off guard. Honestly, watching, I was like, "Whoa, whoa!"
Take it down a notch, there, Whitney.
I was gonna say, Whitney, you don't speak that way. You just want to dance with somebody. That's what she should have said.
Yeah.
I would have. Oh, I would have.
But I can't dance. But I can't dance with somebody with you.
So I can't feel the heat with somebody. Oh, I would have loved that if she dropped that. But
I think that was an alternate take.
Yeah. Quick aside: the song that they danced to at the country western bar.
Good catch.
Was Dolly Parton's, I Will Always Love You. Dolly Parton being the writer of the song that Whitney is now insanely famous for. I would say that because of this movie and her performance of that song, because she does a beautiful job, that a lot of people think that's Whitney Houston's song. Dolly Parton wrote that song.
Well, and in
Dolly Parton's song.
In the movie, in that country western bar, it was actually I don't know who, but it was a male performing it, so it wasn't even Dolly Parton's version of it.
Yeah, you're right.
But you're completely correct that Dolly Parton wrote it, as she's written many famous songs that she isn't known for performing.
Right. Yeah, and she's got a lot in common with Prince in that regard. It's like just such creative geniuses that it's almost like they don't have time to perform all the songs that they write. So they just write them and pass them out.
Yeah.
Here, anybody need this? Sinead, you need a song. Here you go. Bangles, here you go.
Yeah.
Anybody else? And then, they might get around to performing it. But yeah, it's like, they're just all over the place. And so, yeah, it was a nice touch because it was real subtle, like you could hear it, but it didn't jump out that was the song playing, and so it was nice that it was in there. So yeah, we're back to she hates him again.
Yep.
So guess what? It's time because now,
then we get the Entertainment Tonight jingle.
Yeah.
Do.
Yeah, because Rachel is. She's going to be nominated for an Oscar for Best Actress
for a movie called The Queen of the Night.
Yes, and so she's on top of the world here. Not only is she an amazing musician, but she's also nominated for Best Actress.
Yep. So Rachel apparently can act as opposed to Whitney.
Right. Yeah. Rachel's a great. I didn't mind Whitney's performance.
It wasn't awful, but
right.
Yeah.
I'll get to that later. And so, but now because she's nominated, we got to start making the rounds. And so the gang, they take a trip to Miami. There's a charity showing.
Welcome to Miami.
Right. Bienvenido a Miami. So we got to head, got to go to Miami because she's got to make an appearance at a charity. And again, she hates him. They're back in the divide of he's the bodyguard. That's the only reason he's there. And Rachel she's taking this personal.
Oh, she's really personal.
Frank has done a really good job of separating business from pleasure. He had that one night of pleasure and he's back to business. Even though he's seen her entire body, he's only going to guard it now. And so she's got flirt on. I mean, she's like, "Hey, anybody know Frank Farmer? Because I'm ready to hook up with you."
And make sure that he sees and hears it.
Yes. So this is where we meet Portman. He's former colleague of Frank, former Secret Service as well, and he's now just kind of a bodyguard for hire. So Rachel, she's flirting with him big time. They kiss, she makes sure that Frank sees them going back into a room together. It's like, look what I'm going to do with Portman. Meanwhile, in the room, they kiss. Well, her facade breaks and she realizes, I can't do this. Changes her mind. He gets real physical.
He initially doesn't relent.
No, he's going to go for it. And eventually it does stop. But we see her vulnerable again because really this is the first time in this movie that since Frank's been on the payroll that Frank hasn't been there for her. Because she didn't want him, obviously, behind closed doors. And especially after the conversation they had about, are you going to be with me even when I'm on a date? Well, she's back in this room with somebody and Frank's not there. And he gets a little handsy.
She gets scared.
She does. She gets very scared, very vulnerable. And so we're still in Miami, and she gets a phone call. And this might be my favorite part of the movie.
Yeah, she thinks it's Fletcher, her son.
Yes. It's creepy. Like, even thinking about it now, I haven't watched it in a couple of weeks, and it's making the hairs in the back of my neck stand up. But it gets on the phone. She thinks it's Fletcher, and it's the creep that's been sent under the letters.
That's the weirdo.
And does he call her mommy?
I think so.
But he's just so creepy. This character reminds me a lot of the villain in Dirty Harry. Just a great performance, overshadowed by the rest of the movie. Like in Dirty Harry, it's Clint Eastwood being Dirty Harry was why you're watching the movie. But the performance from the villain was essential and creepy, and this guy was like he creeped me out with this phone call. And so she's back to being vulnerable. She
panics. She's freaking out.
Yeah, right. And so she's back because this is the first time he's gotten through. She hasn't seen any letters. She didn't see the deposit he left on her bed. It was all kept from her. And now he's gotten through. He's broken through that security. Of course, she's been pushing Frank out. So she's back to, I need you.
Yeah.
I need you, Frank.
It's the first time since he's come on the payroll that she didn't feel safe. And it was during the moment when she pushed him away.
Yeah. And so she's realizing how essential he is to her security. And so we're going to take a trip. Let's take a breather.
Yep.
All right. Let's get you away from everybody.
Yeah. Away from Cy, away from Tony, away from
Devaney. We're going to go. So the only person they take is the limo driver. And so Frank takes Rachel, Fletcher, Nikki, and the limo driver to his father's mountain cabin, Herb's. Herb. Why'd they call him? His last name's Farmer. Why'd you call him Herb Farmer?
He could have been farming anything.
Exactly. This is my dad, Radish.
I was literally about to say radish. It's like root vegetable, radish. Right.
And so they head to his mountain cabin. Beautiful, beautiful scenery, beautiful cabin. But you could tell
out in the middle of nowhere, very remote.
Yeah, they are remote. I mean, they're away. And we've got some cool moments where, Frank's showing Fletcher about the boat. They've really taken some downtime. Let's let this blow over. Nobody knows where we're going to be. I'll protect you.
Yeah.
We see Nikki a little bit. Nikki's singing. She's kind of outside. She almost feels happy.
Yeah, she looks happy.
She does. She's not working right now either. She's just being family.
And as she's singing, Rachel joins her.
Right. And ruins it.
And Nikki continues to sing, but you could tell there's a little something there.
Right. Like, just let me have this, please.
Yeah.
So
I can't. We're in the middle of nowhere, and I can't escape you.
Right. So we see Nikki's motives come in a little bit here. Nikki makes a move on Frank.
Yeah, she does. She says
like,
she gives a line similar to her sisters from earlier in the movie.
Yes. They come from the same educational upbringing of French. They both know for sure. She's ready to go to the bone zone with Frank.
So
he doesn't want to go.
Why stop at one sister when you could them both?
I know, man. And again, it was another one.
Whoa!
Whoa! And it's just, I don't know. You don't normally hear that kind. You don't normally hear that kind of language out of women's mouths in a movie. You may hear the F word, but you don't hear it used in that connotation as a verb,
as a sexual verb.
Yes, yeah. And we've heard it twice now, only from the women, and so it carries that extra just weight of ouch, so he senses just so much jealousy in Nikki, of the role she had, who she was, prior to Rachel,
who she could have been.
Right. And so he feels for her, but he's got a job to do.
So yeah, he doesn't reciprocate.
No. And so the next day, Frank again checking the perimeter, kinda. Yeah. I mean, he's not really on security detail. They're just out. Well, he notices footsteps in the snow.
There's only a couple of us here.
Right. Who's going on? What's going on here? And Frank, being the Batman of the movie, quickly figures out what's going on. Fletcher's getting into the motorboat all by himself because Frank showed him how to get in the motorboat. Yep. So Fletcher, naturally, he's a nautical expert now. He's going to go out. He's going to go out on his own.
Nautical expert.
And Frank,
he has a horizontal striped shirt on and a red scarf around his neck.
You just described tugboat. And so we'll talk about tugboat next week on our wrestling podcast. Yeah. Oz and Curtis in the squared circle.
Let's talk about heels.
Right. Let's talk about Tugboat. It's the first of a 9-week daily podcast where we discuss Tugboat Thomas and his role in Dino Bravo's career.
The natural disasters.
Right. Fat man in wrestling. Yep. And so Frank, something's off here. Fletcher's in the boat, starts the motor away. Frank, takes off dead sprint, dives off the dock, grabs Fletcher,
tackles an 8-year-old,
tackles an 8-year-old into the water.
And Fletcher can't swim. Fletcher can't swim. Yeah, it was earlier noted that he can't swim.
And so they gets him back to shore, and Rachel's just ripping him into.
Oh yeah,
I mean, we're back to the divide.
Rightfully so.
Rightfully so. She's being a mother here, and we've already seen this, peaks and valleys of Frank and Rachel's working relationship, personal relationship. And they're at a high right now of, I will go in. So with this, it's right back down into the valley until the boat explodes.
Kaboom!
And so Frank just smelled it. He could smell the dynamite on the boat, I guess. He's got a nose for C4. And he figures it out. And the boat blows up. So we're back to now. And it's like, some ways it's like this act is, it just feels like it's like a different chapter of a book. Like, almost like this could be like the continuing adventures of Frank and Rachel. And then this just feels like not shoehorned in, because it fits fine, but it's just I don't know, it's oddly placed in a way. Like, the movie takes a different turn here.
Very action-y.
Yeah, which is okay. I joked a couple weeks ago that the director of this movie was trying to make a Tony Scott film and just didn't quite
this
get
felt
there.
Very Tony Scott.
This is very Tony Scott. Yeah. So that night Frank finds a drunk Nikki, and she admits that she's been the one behind all this. Mm-hmm. She hired a hitman to kill. She went to a club. She was furious, and she hired a hitman out of jealousy to kill Rachel.
Yeah. She doesn't know. She doesn't know who the hitman is. Yeah,
she doesn't know who the hitman is, though. And so, coincidentally, Frank at this moment hears a noise upstairs, which I'm so glad that he heard this noise after Nikki admitted what happened, because otherwise it would have just been a mystery the whole rest of the movie. So thankfully, the plot fell right into line. Hears the noise, and he realizes that's where Fletcher and Rachel are. He heads upstairs to check on them. Hitman enters, shoots Nikki dead right there.
Yeah.
So Nikki's gone. And Frank chases him through the woods. They're having a nice little gunfire fight. I wish they had snowmobiles. I really wish they both
could have turned into a Bond movie.
Yeah, so we were on par for a Bond film here, but we just didn't get it. A lot of foot racing, a lot of Frank Farmer and his samurai.
That's right. That moment where he drops to his knees in the middle of
and just senses
and listens, and like the bad guy walks into like a tree branch, and he almost and with his eyes closed and like 360 degrees around him, he almost shoots him.
Right, and like if I were the hitman, because obviously at this point, you know, the hitman is advanced because we're looking at the best of the best, the Bodyguard, and this guy can elude him and outsmart him. So at this point, like
he becomes Daredevil.
Yes, he's very Jedi-esque here. But this would have been a perfect opportunity for this hitman, who clearly is on par with Frank Farmer, to turn around and realize that the guy that's after me is kneeled down in the snow, not paying attention.
And has his eyes closed.
And that's the end of the movie, folks.
Roll credits. And I will always love you, even though you're not good at your job.
Right. She yells out, "He's my bodyguard" at his funeral.
He's not my bodyguard. He's kind of bad at his job.
Right. And so, you know, he gets away. The hitman gets away. You know, Frank gets a phone call the next day
from Fuller's dad.
Right. Fuller's dad gives him a call because it's almost like they've got this weird little connection of, you're not in the service anymore, but I'm still going to help you out with info. Mm-hmm. Well, long story short, they've apprehended the stalker, and they had him in custody that night that there was the hit on Rachel. And so,
dual villains.
Two bad guys.
S word.
And so we head back to LA because we've got to bear, like, I'm curious, how did Nikki's body get back to LA? That's not my I've got a different one. But I just thought of this, like, back in LA after the funeral, did they just like toss her in the trunk of the limo and head home? Or,
they floated her down river on the remnants of the boat.
Like but was it like Tony Stark wise, or was it like Viking funeral esque?
They literally
catch her on fire,
and just.
Crazy thing is, they're on a lake.
Yeah,
so she's just floating around,
like Andy Bernard in that episode of The Office where he's got the sumo suit.
Exactly, he's just floating around. He thinks she's going down river, but there's no river. So
Herb took care of it. I'm sure it was Herb.
Right. He's right. So they probably they just sent her back. So back in LA after the funeral, Rachel, it's Oscar time.
Yep.
You know, and while there's obviously been major trauma, I've got to go. So Rachel, she's got to attend the Oscars.
I'm tired of being afraid.
And she's a presenter. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, she's got to move on. She can't let this dominate her life. And so, you know, we're backstage. It's a very busy backstage area. It makes Frank's job very hard to keep an eye on things. You know, go ahead.
Robert Wool, I think, playing himself.
Thank you. Yes, I was going there and I couldn't remember the actor or the comedian's name. So thank you for that.
Robert Wool is hosting the show. Okay,
he's
okay,
and Frank bumps into Portman backstage.
What's he doing there?
Asks what is he doing? Well, they're standing next to a monitor, and Robert Wool's on the monitor. He's like, I'm protecting this guy. Okay, Frank buys it. You're here. You know, you're a hired bodyguard as well. It makes sense.
Yeah. Calls it a short-term profitable gig.
Yes. And so during the awards ceremony, I mean, it's all in Rachel's head. She is still afraid. Yeah. She's still living in fear. During the awards presentation, you know, they're going to reveal, I think it's Best Song, which she's also up for. You know, but during the awards presentation, you know, when they go to pull out of the envelope, she sees another, not really ransom letter, but, you know, she sees another threatening letter being pulled from the envelope.
Yeah, so she's hallucinating.
Yes, and it's all in her mind. She panics. She believes she sees that letter. She flees the stage, and she's mad at Frank again.
Yeah, you put this in my head. You're making me paranoid. I just look ridiculous in front of millions of people.
Right. I know there's been threats on my life and my sister's dead, but this is all your fault, Frank Farmer.
Yeah.
Right. Frank has not told her that Nikki actually hired the hitman, so that probably would have put a little dour on the funeral.
I did like that scene though, how it played out, because it showed her like walking up to the podium, and she's like hyper alert.
Yeah,
and like aware of like audience members' movements, and I thought that was a cool sequence.
Because again, this is the first time since the attack that Frank hasn't been right there, and so it was. I liked how they filmed it. It was very, just very quick cuts and very kind of streaky filmmaking. Like it just, you could sense the paranoia through the filmmaking.
Tony Scott-esque, yeah,
very Tony Scott-esque. Yes. So. Rachel, it's time for Best Actress, and Rachel wins the Best Actress
Congratulations!
Award. Yay for Whitney!
In the meantime, Frank ran into Robert Wool, and he's like, "Where's Portman at?" And Robert Wool's like, "Who's Portman?"
Right. So, yes, Frank is now. Wait a minute here. So, she wins Best Actress Award. She's headed on stage. Frank sees Portman. He's kind of flirting around the sides. He's got a camera. He's got like a VHS camcorder that he's filming with, as a bodyguard would do.
I think it was a Magnavox.
It was a Betamax. But the bodyguard cameraman pulling double duty. I mean, he's an opportunistic man. But Frank sees him with this camera, but he also sees that he's holding a gun and he's aiming it at Rachel. And so, and probably, one of the most famous moments of the movie, he gets a chance to guard her body. Portman takes a shot. Frank, we've seen him very fleet of foot as he rescued Fletcher. He's just as fast here.
Fleet of foot.
Sprints across.
Fleet of foot Frank Farmer.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen at home, that's your tongue twister for the day. So fleet of foot Frank Farmer. Takes a bullet for her, jumps in front, gets shot. He does get off a shot and kills Portman, like blows his head up.
Yeah, and it's like blood splatters everywhere, like over like a woman. They had a woman in a white dress right there, just to react to the blood splatter.
So he gets one final shot off, and honestly, we were led to believe. I thought that he died. Like, he succumbed to this injury, saving her.
And he's lying on the stage, Oz, and she realizes what's happened, and like, oh, it's not her blood.
Right.
I'll let you give the line, Oz. What does Rachel say once she realizes what's happening?
I'm going to let you take it.
Thank you.
You've set the stage so well. Go for it.
I've been saying this line to Melissa a lot over the last week, just out of nowhere. She realizes what's going on. And she just goes, "He's my bodyguard." Oh,
you deserve that.
Thank you.
He's my bodyguard.
That's the culmination of the film right there.
Almost. We got one final scene.
Yes. But like that's yeah.
Oh yes. Yeah. I mean, you could end it there and it would have been just fine.
But
we have one final
scene.
The
epilogue.
We got Rachel and crew. They're boarding a plane with a new bodyguard. Everything up to this point is Frank's a goner. Like, he died. This bodyguard is much older, probably not as fast, probably can't smell fear.
Probably not the lover.
No, I'm sure he's not. Probably doesn't even have a samurai sword.
Let alone an unsheathed one.
Right. This guy, he's got a limp banana down there.
I'm never going to be able to look at bananas the same way again. Thank you for that.
Well, eat them when they're ripe. But then we cut to Frank's standing there in a sling. He's standing aside. He's watching them get on the plane. Rachel thanks him for his service, and she gets on the plane. She kind of jokes about, why'd you have to recommend such an old bodyguard? Because clearly she's ready to hook up with bodyguards. So before the plane takes off, she stops the plane. She rushes to Frank and gives him a very long, very dizzy kiss.
Oh, yeah. That camera is circling.
Woo!
I was reading in the trivia for this that the cameraman on the rig, because it was spinning so fast, the force that was centripetal force, he fell off the camera rig,
and they just kept it going. Yeah.
And it was a cool sequence though, because she's running off the plane and it's all one shot, and the camera is like running with her, and then circles like a dozen times around him as they passionately kiss.
Poor cameraman. So he's laying there. He needs Frank Farmer's sling.
Yeah, he does.
He's broken his arm.
He's my cameraman.
And the movie ends with Frank on the job protecting another politician.
Yeah.
He's standing on a stage behind somebody, and that's it. That's The Bodyguard.
That's 1992's The Bodyguard.
Yeah, it's I enjoy the movie. I really didn't mind it. So
I would classify it. It's not a bad movie. It's not a good movie, but it's not a bad movie.
No.
It's it's B-rate Tony Scott. It's
yes.
All right. At this point in the show, Oz and I give our own unique rating to the movie that we just watched and reviewed. Oz, how would you rate 1992's The Bodyguard?
6.5 katanas. Yeah, 6.5 samurai swords.
There you go.
That's what I would give this rating. How about you?
I'm gonna go with 6 water worlds.
6. Wow, 6 entire water.
6 water worlds. You can take that for what it is.
That's a lot of water.
It is. 6 water worlds.
In all 6 of these water worlds, do they drink their own urine?
In 4 of them, they do.
Okay, yeah. I have never seen Waterworld either.
Oh,
so.
It's Waterworld. And this we'll save the details for another show. But I have a soft spot for Waterworld just because it's
probably
so
like it.
Big and so dumb. Like it's bad, but it's fun, but it's bad.
Right, and I think I would like it for that reason. I think it would probably check more boxes. Than the Postman does.
And Dennis Hopper is a weirdly funny villain. I don't know. It's such a hard movie to describe.
Well, Dennis Hopper as a villain has sold me as it is.
Yeah.
So I'm just willing to check out for that.
All right, as we bring the show to a conclusion, Oz and I have our 3-2-1 segment where we each share 3 goods, 2 bads, and 1 from the film we've just discussed. Oz, what are your 3 goods for The Bodyguard?
My 3 goods for The Bodyguard. I honestly, I liked Whitney Houston's performance. I think for her first movie, she did just fine. I would rather watch Whitney Houston's performance in this movie than any of Madonna's performances in any of her movies. And so not bad for a first one. I think they did it right by basically letting her play herself, or at least a caricature of herself.
Like an exaggerated version of herself.
That there was some comfort zone there, because the scenarios that she was in, award shows, music videos, on stage, those are all things that she has excelled at this point. And so it was really just, can you carry enough of a scene to get between those moments in a movie? And so she did fine. I think also pairing her with somebody that, even though Kevin Costner was at the top of his game for this movie, I still don't view Kevin Costner as like a great actor. And so putting those two together, like, he didn't outperform her in this movie, and she didn't underperform or outperform him in this movie. I think they meshed well together. There are far better actors at this juncture in time that I think the divide between acting ability would have been very noticeable and detrimental, really, to the relationship. But I think this was a good pairing.
Well,
so
one of my backup goods was actually the chemistry between the leads. So I agree with you completely there.
Second good, the pacing, very solid. I think I told you, off camera at one point, but the 2 movies that Jenny picked for this month, when I asked her which one she wanted to watch first, and she said, well, if we're tired, we'll watch The Bodyguard, and if we're not tired, we'll watch the other one, because the other one's longer. And really, there's only 4 minutes difference between the 2 movies she picked. And so, but the pacing of this is just, it was fast. It was a 2-hour long movie, like 2 hours and 7 minutes or something like that. But it clipped right along. There were a few parts that drug a little bit, but not enough to, make you lose focus on what's going on. So I thought the pacing was very solid in this movie. And my third one is the scene with the phone call from the stalker.
Yeah,
it's very creepy.
Yeah, very creepy.
I wanted more of him in this movie. I think the threat would have been amplified more if we had more of him. We saw him a couple of times. As a matter of fact, he was at the end too.
He was there.
When they were coming down the red carpet to the Oscars. He was there. But it's just, I don't know. It's just I don't know. It could have been so much more, and it wasn't, and it bothered me. But I thought just that phone call alone, that's just the blank stare in his eye. The couple of times he was on camera, he played a very good creepy guy.
His
his
locker shrine to her, yeah.
Yes, I know that he was aware of. He even kind of someone would come by, he'd close his locker a little bit because he realized
he knows it's wrong. He knows it's wrong.
Yes. So what about you? What are your goods?
My three goods, I mentioned a little bit earlier, but that sequence towards the end where Rachel is presenting the award and she's terrified, and they do a great job with the editing and just kind of seeing through her eyes how afraid she is, and the walk up to the stage and the lights are in her eyes and she's disoriented. I thought that was a great little sequence. They gave a lot of insight and showed you what terror really looked like there. My second good is just, hey man, Whitney can sing. This movie was a showcase for her real talent. You joked before that it's kind of a 2-hour long Whitney Houston music video, which for better and for worse it is. But man, Whitney Houston can sing, and I cannot and will not do justice to that. But
no.
Yeah.
She's a great, always was a great performer. It's unfortunate her personal life was so dark. Because she's great. Just great talent. I really got a lot of times, when in film and movie making, and this too, when you have a singing part, or even if there's like a scene at a party or whatever and there's music playing, like they don't have the music playing on set. You're just dancing to nothing because you don't, you want to record the audio. But the way she was performing when she was singing, I'm willing to bet they just let her sing. She looked like she was actually singing, not lip syncing her performance, but she looked like she was actually letting those pipes rip. Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if they did and then just dubbed over it in post. But no, I agree.
Yeah. What a vocal performer she is. Oof.
Yes.
And then this was kind of an underrated, very subtle part of the movie, but I like the little back and forth, the story arc between Tony and Frank, the two, like her old bodyguard who stayed on the staff, and Frank, and how they was so antagonistic at the beginning. Like who's Tony? Was offended that this guy was here. Just put off. This is my gig. This is my job.
Right.
And eventually, at the end, they're working seamlessly. Side by side to protect her, and Tony literally gives an eye to keep her safe. Portman literally poked his eye out.
Yeah. Right.
But I thought that was fun watching these two guys and how they do the same thing. They approach it in different ways, but by the end, they're seamlessly working as a team.
Yeah, Tony bought into the rank and file of what's going on, and one piece that I omitted earlier, and it has nothing to do with 3-2-1s, but I just want to let it in, is Frank's big drawback and his hesitancy in his career is when he was a Secret Service agent. The day Ronald Reagan was shot, he was not guarding him. And so Frank always took it personal that the reason Reagan was shot is because he had the day off.
Because he wasn't there.
And so that's really been a thorn in his side in his over-professionalism for every job he's had since is, I should have been there and I wasn't. So from now on, I'm going to make sure I am there so things like this don't happen. So, that's just kind of an aside. I meant to throw that in earlier, and it didn't fall in organically, so I didn't want to move on without forgetting it.
So, Oz, what are your two bads for the Bodyguard?
All right, my first bad, there's just one too many threats. I think they could have combined the Stalker and the Hitman together. It would have made a tighter movie. Could easily have combined it as just the one character, eliminating the need really for Nikki to be responsible for the death, because the stalk. I mean, it's just a splintered storyline between the two. They introduce a stalker, they give him these threatening things to do, but then they never go anywhere with him. And at the same time, you introduce this hitman, and late in the second act of, and even when you're introduced him, we don't know. I mean, Nikki's even said, "I don't know who he is." Well, we don't know who the stalker is up to this point either. So I really think they could have tied those two together, and it wouldn't have felt so splintered.
Sure.
And you still could have gotten the same message across without having this Portman character. Portman could have been the stalker the whole time. Like, it could have been one character all throughout. And then the R rating. They could you're gonna. It's a very mild R-rated film. So one of two ways. Make it PG-13 by dropping the couple of F-bombs that Nikki and Rachel share. Or go whole hog and make this a rated R film. I feel like the only reason it was rated R was for those two moments. There are deaths, but they're not gory deaths. There's not a lot of blood. If there is blood, it's like Frank getting shot. You don't even like see a wound. It's just, so it's they split the divide. Like, it's 1992. At this point, we know what a PG-13 film is. We know what a rated R film is. And this just, I can't figure out why. Really, it's just those two F-bombs that make it a rated R film for me. I don't really see what else pushed the edge.
Yeah, pick a lane.
Yeah, exactly. So those are my two bads. How about you?
My two bads, I'm going to go with one of them is just really Nikki would plausibly hire a hitman to kill her sister because she's jealous. Right. Like, you can't just tell your sister off. You're going to hire a professional to kill her.
And you're on the payroll. Yeah. It's one thing if she squeezed you out completely. But it's like she keeps you around.
Yeah.
And it's one-sided. I didn't get the feel watching this that Rachel was shoving her career in Nikki's face. It's just, that's a lot of harbor jealousy.
Yeah, like it's like that escalated quickly.
Right. I hired a hitman to kill my sister, and I'm drunk, and I don't know who I hired.
Yeah. Really?
So what bar did you go to?
Yeah.
Like, it's probably Bret Hart's bar up in Canada.
Probably, with all the wrestling references we've made.
Well, where else would you hire a hitman?
Hi-oh. I see what you did there. And then my other bad is the Henry character, the driver. Man, at the beginning, they introduced him with Frank, and there was some promise there. They had good chemistry. Yeah. He was going to be kind of like the young guy on staff that Frank extended trust to and kind of roped him in. He turned him into kind of a pseudo bodyguard as well. He trained him how to Tokyo drift in that limo, and then nothing.
Even took him to her.
Yeah, took him to the radish farm. Like he was there, but he didn't do anything. And I just thought that was such a wasted character, a wasted opportunity to kind of have this camaraderie between these two guys on staff, the one guy he trusts there, and then just nothing. The character had no purpose.
Yeah, I agree. There was a lot of introductions in this movie that essentially kind of went nowhere. Yeah. I mean, you got Frank and Rachel, obviously, but like you said, the limo driver went nowhere. The stalker went nowhere. Yeah. I wouldn't go as far to say Bill and Cy went nowhere, but they were definitely more prominent in the beginning of the film.
They were virtually absent for the whole second half of the movie.
And that's kind of what I was getting at, is that everybody was there in full force until they went to the cabin. And that's why I said it just feels like a different chapter in another book of, like, it's like a couple pages stuck together, and you didn't realize that you just wrote off a bunch of characters with no explanation.
All right, Oz, what was your for the Bodyguard?
Oh, why? Okay, early on, Frank gets home, and he does what every action hero in the late 80s and 90s does.
Pours himself a drink.
Why does everybody cook in the dark? Like, Jenny and I are watching this, and we both just kind of said the same thing. I'm like, what? Why is it dark? Like, turn some lights on. Everybody in these movies, especially 90s action movies, I mean, it gets to the point where everybody's in the dark so much that, back to one of our favorites, like Emilio Estevez makes fun of it in Loaded Weapon 1, and it's like everybody's in the moonlight, everybody's in the dark. Just turn the lights on. He was making like mac and cheese in the dark or something like that. So that's my It's like, why just turn the light on? Why is everybody got to be in the dark?
That sequence, it reminded me of the scene. There's a scene in The Naked Gun with Leslie Nielsen where he gets back. I think he had just met the bad guy and Priscilla Presley's character, and he's at his apartment going through the fridge, and it's like he's taken off his shirt, so he's got on like the white undershirt, and it's a stereotypical like tough guy career. And he's let his guard down. He's at home in his dingy apartment, and it's dark. And he's going through the fridge, and he takes out a half gallon of milk, and he goes to drink it, and he ugh. And he pours it in the sink, and it's just plop, 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 plop. It's like just like months old, and and that scene actually, I had it in my notes that it reminded me of that scene from The Naked Gun.
Plopping milk is disgusting. It reminds me.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
And The Naked Gun was made 4 years before The Bodyguard.
Yeah. And so they're just it's I don't know, it's part of a movie like this.
Yes,
I guess.
if you're a tough guy in your home, then you make yourself a meal in the dark with your alcohol.
You got to check a box.
Yeah.
I remember back at when we were in college at Western. Sophomore year, you were in a different building and I was an RA for the first year, and I'm hanging out and across the hall in a couple of my residents' rooms, and I asked them if they have anything to drink, and Ryan, the kid's name, I still remember because the kid wore sweatpants everywhere. He goes, yeah, there's something in the fridge. So there's you remember milk chugs? Yeah. Just like, he had a chocolate milk chug. He's like, yeah, go ahead. So I take it and I just open it up, take a drink, and I mean, it was chunky milk. This is like March, something like, it's like spring semester, and the expiration date on this was October.
Oh God!
It had been in there undiscarded for months, overdue.
Oh, that's so gross.
I mean, when he sent me to the fridge to get something to drink, I just assumed everything in the fridge was current, So I'm like, he wasn't even aware how old it was. It was the most vile thing I had up to that point in my life until you and I went back and forth with Jones Cola.
Yeah. Until the Brussels sprout flavored cola. Yeah.
Until the Brussels sprout soda. So yeah, when you were talking the Naked Gun plopping on the milk, that's the first thing that popped in my mind was the milk chug pudding that I was eating.
Oh, it's so gross.
So what's your
My is why Robert Wool as the host of the awards at the end,
of the Oscars.
Yeah, I was debating whether to put this in a bad category or a category, but I found it very distracting. Why do you have to have a host? Like, the only point was that the whole Portman misdirect.
Exactly.
But you didn't even have to show a host. But there's Robert Wool yucking it up, making terribly dated jokes about women and no, this is completely taking away from this pivotal moment in the whole movie. And there's Robert Wool doing his Robert Wool bits.
I know, he's an extension of Robert Wool and Batman.
Basically, yeah.
It's just Robert Wool wooling.
Yeah,
that's all he knows how to do.
So that's my All
right, well, I thought I liked it. It wasn't bad. Yeah. This was a nice back and forth. this, you know, it was fine. Yeah. It was fine.
I think you liked it a little better than me. But
I'm sure I did.
But again, I didn't think it was bad. It was just, it's okay.
No,
it's all right.
It wasn't bad.
It's, you know, it's as we've said, well, it's a Tony Scott knockoff.
Like I mentioned last week, you know, I'm a fan of those movies in an actor or actress's career that were just, I don't want to call them paycheck movies, but just kind of forgotten films. Yeah. And I mentioned even last week that this, if it weren't for the soundtrack, I think this would have been one of those blip on the filmography radar of Kevin Costner. A movie that was, even if it was big at the time, it doesn't hold, it doesn't stand up. It's not necessarily memorable. It would have been one of those kind of like that Kevin Costner Gene Hackman movie that you mentioned that I'd already forgotten the name of.
That took us way too long to come back to.
Right. But it's just one of those that it's like, I'm sure that movie is fine. It's probably a solid way to spend an hour and a half to 2 hours. And, you know, but it's not culturally significant. It's not going to push the agenda on any sort of, you know, social commentary or anything. You know, and it's not going to influence future movies. It's just there. Yep. I think this would have been one of those movies that was just there if it weren't for the soundtrack of this film.
I would agree completely.
Especially, you know, keeping it in even pop culture today. Really, I mean, you know, you still see Whitney Houston's "I Will Always Love You" show up in things, and so, you know, for that, it did scratch an itch that I do enjoy of, you know, just that kind of movie of an actor that, you know, did what they did. So we are 2 weeks in now to Wives' Choice. You know, here at Let's Talk About Flicks. I'll spare you the usual like, subscribe, comment, review, share with your friends, etc. You can find us on social media. You'll see the links below. What are we watching next week?
Next week, it's back to me and my wife Melissa's choice, and continuing her aggressive, predatorial version of romance. We're going with 2002's Maggie Gyllenhaal, James Spader-led indie flick, Secretary. So if you like your romance to come with a leather zipper mask, check out next week's Secretary.
I have seen this movie once. I don't remember anything about it outside of the 50 Shades of Grey-esque relationship kind of stuff.
It is a good character study. It's a good character study movie.
I do feel, though, that I was surprised because Jenny didn't know about the movie. You know, I told her who was in it, and she cracks up because every time I tell her James Spader's in it, she knows who James Spader is, but not by name.
That guy from Thing, him,
right? Yeah. She's like, who's in it? With Maggie Gyllenhaal. Well, she knows Maggie Gyllenhaal, and James Spader. She's like, James Spader. Go Robert California. She's like, oh, okay.
That's the connection.
Or, yeah, I always say Robert California, and then she'll go, oh, and he's from Pretty in Pink. Yes. So she's got it down. But I showed her the trailer last night, and I really think the trailer for this came out, unless I'm not remembering the movie correctly, but I think the trailer for this came out in that zone of time where the trailers did not fit the tone of the movie. There was a Billy Crystal movie where he's an NBA referee. I think it's called like Forget Paris.
Yeah.
And the trailer to that movie is like a minute and a half of him being an NBA referee with current NBA stars. But I've seen the movie, and that is probably a minute and a half worth of the movie. So I remember being very angry at the trailer because it led me to watch a movie that I thought was going to be in front of me, and it was not in front of me. And the movie trailer for Secretary plays off like almost like a straight comedy. It's got a Seinfeld-esque blippity soundtrack behind it. Right. It's just very like hijinky and I'm watching this trailer last night and I'm like, I don't remember the movie being this comical.
I mean, it is you could classify it as a dark comedy. There are dark comedy elements to it, but it's not like a guffaw knee slapper.
Right. And that's how it played out, was very very And it's like, so I'm interested to revisit it because it's been a long time since I've seen it, and I'm very curious of the trailer did not jog the memories that I thought were there, and so yeah, we'll be watching it this week to discuss next week as well. All
right, you want to take us home, Oz?
Yeah. So again, episode 15. This is what we do now. This is our thing. For Let's Talk About Flicks, I'm Oz.
I'm Curtis.
And we will catch you next week. So join us, share, subscribe to all the things we talked about earlier, and come back next week when we discuss the 2002, I don't even remember who directed it, it doesn't matter, Maggie Gyllenhaal, James Spader's Secretary. So, all right, you guys have a good week, and we'll see you sometime in the future.
See you, folks.